Okay, good morning to all. Myself Niranjan Patnaik. Today I am going to discuss about the chapter number 6 of Cryptography and Network Security, about user authentication. So before going to discuss, let's look about the article of this chapter. First, authentication basics, password, authentication token, certificate-based authentication, biometric authentication. First, come to the authentication basics. Authentication is the process of verifying the identity of user or information. User authentication is the process of verifying the identity of user when that user logs into a computer system. And the main objective of authentication is to allow authorized users to access the computer and to deny access to the unauthorized users. So this authentication means what? An authentication means to authenticate a people or to make sure that those people who are using or logging the system is authorized or not. That is the process of authentication. So operating system generally identifies, authenticates users using following three ways: by your password, physical identification, and the biometrics. So first come to the password part. Passwords are the most common form of authentication. Is a one string of alphabets, special character, number, which is supposed to be known only to the authentic person that is being authenticated. Behind password authentication, there are great myths. People believe that the use of a password is the simplest and least expensive authentication mechanism, as it does not require any special hardware or software support. So first come to the clear text password. Before going to these steps, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, first, and what is the clear text password? That means there is no encryption process. Whatever you are giving the password is simply stored in the database, and when you retrieve the data from the database, you can easily recognize that. That means there is no encryption. Simple plain text is written in simple English language. Anybody can read that password. Right now, that is a clear text password. So first move to the step 1. In the step 1 process, prompt for user ID and the password. During the authentication, that means during the authentication process, the first application prompt a screen for user ID and the password. Whatever the prompt will display on your screen, user ID and password. Step 2, user enters user ID and passwords. That means when that dialog box will appear on your screen, you are to enter the ID and the password. When application prompt screen, the user enters his or her user ID and password, and then press the OK or sign in button. Step 3, user ID and password validation. In this step, the server checks the user database to see if this particular user ID and password exist or not. This validation is done by the user authenticator program, and these programs check the enter user ID and password again the store user database, and based on the success or the failure, it returns a result. Simple thing, whatever the ID and password entered by the user, it moves to the user database area and it compares the ID and the password. Then it is be validated, then it is fine. It is not validated, then it will be send an error report. Next is your authentication result. In this step, the user authenticator program returns a result to a server based on the success and failure of the validation process of user ID and the password. Step 5, inform user accordingly. That means based on the result, whether it is authenticated or not, based on the result, the server sends the result to the user. If the authentication results are correct, then the server sends a menu of options to the user, which contains various actions for users to perform. If the authentication results fail, then the server sends an error message to the user. So what are the problems? Very simple, simplest technology, the clear text passwords. whatever the general process is going on. When you sign in the process, the user ID and password will display on your screen. You put the user ID or password in that box, then it will come back to the user database area, then it will compare with the whatever the data is stored, then it will, if it is authenticated, then open the windows, otherwise send error message by the server to the user. Okay, but here is the problem in the clear text password. There are two major problems in this type of password authentication mechanism. What are the problems? Look, the database contains a password in clear text format. User database contains user ID and the password in clear text formats, whatever I discussed. So if somehow attacker gets access to this user database, an attacker will get the gist of all user IDs and password. To avoid this, it is better to store the user ID and password in encrypted form, because in the clear text password everything is clearly visible to the user, right? So you can say if the attacker is there, then you can also, the attacker also clearly visible, because it's simple in the English language you have written, and then it will be present in the user database area. Password travels, next problem, password travels in clear text form, user's computer to server computer. If we store the user ID and password in an encrypted format, the first problem can solve. But what if an attacker gets access to this information while traveling from user's computer to server computer? That means, suppose the password is in encrypted form in the database is fine, the first problem is solved because it's clear. But whatever, when the password move from the your browser area to database area, in that path, in between the path, if the hacker hack that data, then what will happen? That is the problem right now. So to this solve this problem, there is another method is known as the message digest of password. Rather than storing the what it says, or this technique says, rather than storing the password on clear text format, calculate the message digest of password, then store in the user database. Now, rather than you store the any encrypted password in the your database area, better to calculate the message digest of the password, then store in the user database. Perform user authentication, where the user's computer calculate the message digest and of the password and sends both user ID and password to the server for authentication. The server passes these values to the user authenticator program to validate the user ID and message digest of the password against the database. So this is message digest means what is the thing? Message digest is nothing. It is simply when that is the message digest is encrypted form, which is calculated by using a special type of function, and by using that function, that encrypted code is created, and that encrypted code now move from the browser area to the server area, right? And that server also maintain that encrypted data, not on the on clear text or any clear text. Clear? Next come to the adding randomness. What is the adding? To improve security of the previous scheme, that means that this message digest we need to add randomness. Calculate the message digest or password and store in the user database as derived password. The user sends a login request then to the server with user ID only. When the server receives a login request, it first checks whether the user ID is valid or not. If not, it sends an error screen, and if the user ID is valid, then it creates the random challenge and sends back to the user. Clear? That means when the ID is created or ID is verified successfully, then one random generation is created by the server and moved to the receiver side. That is the thing. The application displays the password entry screen for the user. When the user enters the password, the application runs a program to calculate the message digest of the password, and this message digest is used to encrypt the random challenge which is received from the server. Next, when the server receives the encrypted data, a random challenge from the user, it validates the random challenge to ensure that it comes from the right user. This validation can be done in two ways. The first way is the server tries to decrypt the random challenge with the message digest of the user's password and then compare it with the original random challenge. If it matches, it ensures that it comes from the right user. The second way is the server encrypts the original random challenge with the message digest of users passwords and compares it with the user's encrypted random challenge. If it matches, it ensures that it comes from the right user. Right? These are the process. Next, based on the previous action, success or failure, the server sends appropriate action to the user. So these are that means the message digest is a method through which you can create the encrypted password by using some mathematical function. But randomness, what do you mean the randomness? Now first is you calculate the message digest of password and store in the user database as derived password. User sends a login request to the server, right? First your message digest, your password, whatever the password, an ID is created within your database. First it will be the message digest is created for that password, and that encrypted password now stored in the database area. First thing. Second thing is that the user sends a login request to the server with user ID only. Right now, then whatever, suppose I am a client and send a request to the server through only ID. When the server receives a login request, it first checks whether the user ID is authenticated or not. If it is authenticated, then it creates a random challenge and sends back to the user. Clear? The application displays the password entry screen for the user. When the user enters the password, the application runs a program to calculate the message digest of the password. When the server receives that encrypted random challenge from the user, it validates the random challenge to ensure that it comes from the right user. So these are about the clear text password. So thank you for today's class. For next onwards, discuss the authentication token. Thank you to all.